Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started this afternoon. Um, and just thank you again. I know I've said that a couple of times already, but thank you so much for taking time out of your days, possibly during a lunch break, to join us for our webinar today. I will get us started. So we're going to talk today about creating that scalable support through a strategic service desk partnership. And I will get us started with introductions. So, and welcoming me, that was perfect. Welcoming today with me is Tracy Smith from the University of Virginia, and I will go ahead and let Tracy do his introduction first.
Good afternoon, everyone. Like Lisa said, thank you for attending. It's exciting to see you here and have this conversation. I'm the Director of IT Service Support Operations at the University of Virginia. And as you could imagine, my areas include support and operations. We cover Tier 1 and 2 service desk, the incident management practice, the accounts and access management teams, service request and fulfillment, cloud application administration, and enterprise license management, among others. Today, the slides I'm hoping will be a backdrop or a reference, and I understand that the recording of this session will be available to you. My goal through the conversation is to get you thinking about what questions you should be asking when you're making a decision to outsource Tier 1 support. Now, today I'm going to be talking about Tier 1 IT support or IT service desk or help desk, but the concepts that we're going to cover really apply to any Tier 1 support function, like LMS support or financial aid or student accounts or registration or admissions. The concepts about selecting an outsourced partner apply to all of those types of support. So at the end of the session today, if you leave with a lot of questions that need to be answered, then I would consider this time a success. And I would hope that you gain some takeaways to make a future engagement with an external provider even more successful. For today's agenda, oh, go ahead, Lisa.
No, you're fine. I was just going to let everybody know, because I'm going to jump off camera, that my name is Lisa Hanson. I am our Director of Strategic Consulting at Anthology, and I am just so excited and thankful for Tracy being here with us today. I will tell you I'm going to hop off of my camera, and this is all about Tracy and the amazing insights that he has into this world of outsourcing your IT support or any Tier 1 support. So thank you again, and I will see you all later.
Thanks, Lisa, and sorry about that. I get really passionate and really excited about this topic. It's something that we've lived in this space for some time and have some neat stories and lessons learned. So today we're going to discuss, why and how you should outsource to a partner, what the benefits are, considerations for a successful implementation, and some of the pitfalls. And what's really important, I believe, is managing the ongoing relationship once you select and implement a service desk partner. So why choose a partner for Tier 1 support? I think it's really important to start out by saying that we consider this a partnership. This is not just a vendor that provides a service for us. That frame of mind is so important as we move forward, and I think you're going to see that as we go through this conversation. So the first reason to select a partner for Tier 1 support is a higher quality and a consistent service experience for your users. A partner that specializes in providing Tier 1 or frontline support already has well-oiled processes, including a highly trained staff. They have processes replicated across many institutions, if not dozens, hundreds. They have mature knowledge management processes internally. They have mature quality review processes internally that should mesh or dovetail into the processes from your institution. Providing IT support is a vendor partner's bread and butter. They have to do what they do very well, or they simply risk extinction. Support is not something that they have to do because they're providing IT services. IT support is their only service. The second reason to select a partner for Tier 1 support is to better utilize resources. So efficiency, scalability. Having a vendor partner take care of Tier 1 support will free up more highly paid staff to focus on maintaining and improving your IT services. And I'll talk a little bit more about each of these as we go through today. Scalability is another really important reason to select an external vendor partner. The ability to scale today is important. What's your internal ability to scale? And this is where I'll pause and tell a couple of our stories. We all know what happened in March 2020. I don't need to dredge that up again, but still, we all had to swivel and put our classes online. We had 8,000 classes roughly. We went online in 8 days. That required a total reorganization of our support model. We had primarily on-site users like many of you. Everybody had to go to a video conferencing education model and support users in their homes rather than in our campuses and in our buildings. When we called our support partner, they delivered. They were doing this for all of their customers. They were working on how to scale quickly and swivel chair over to a remote support model, and they did it very well. Our second story is in 2015, you may be aware that the University of Virginia suffered a cyber attack. I had to call leadership with our vendor partner at that time and request on a very short notice 100 advisors to be added to our account. The answer we got on that phone call was, "We will be ready." And again, our vendor partner delivered. And of course, I don't even need to say we've suffered a tragedy on our grounds, on our campus just this week. At 3 o'clock in the morning on Monday morning, I sent one email to our contacts at our current vendor partner, which is Anthology. I trusted and knew that because our processes were in place, that we would not have an issue fielding calls, inquiries, requests for IT support related to the media that was coming into Charlottesville. And again, one email and I could rest because I knew that our vendor partner would take care of what needed to be taken care of, and they did. The third reason to select a partner for Tier 1 support is expanded support coverage. So a number of our peers have looked for after-hours support and supplementing that for their existing services. And that was a main driver for us. We didn't just want after-hour support. We needed a complete end-to-end solution for 24/7 support coverage. And that was the main driver for our decision years ago when we went to outsource initially. These three reasons, service experience, resource utilization, and service desk availability, they're all key then when we talk about the fourth reason, the cost versus benefits or the value assessment conversation. So how do we derive value from our service desk partner? The answer is just in a couple of phrases. We spend less internal effort today managing support than when we staffed the service desk internally. Our focus has completely changed from managing complaints, putting out support fires, managing staff, schedules, to managing things that strategically matter, like the quality of our knowledge, internal process efficiency, and the process for building, testing, and releasing new services or making improvements to existing services. You know, the old adage, time is money, is still true. The faster our users are productive again, the lower the cost is to the organization. Our relationship with our vendor partner is built on service goals, and they are working. How do we know? Well, a litmus test in any organization is customer satisfaction. It's one of the common metrics used in support. But customer satisfaction directly ties to efficiency and effectiveness. Our customers are more satisfied with an outsourced arrangement than they were when we provided support on site. We measure that through the number of complaints, the reduction in complaints, and a simple increase in customer satisfaction scores. And then we also watch things like first call resolution and time to resolution. Those all go hand in hand with institutional cost savings because we now have a mature outsourced IT support partner that brings that value to the table and takes some of those administrative burdens away from us. So tip of the day in this area is be sure to do a holistic and a realistic cost versus benefits value assessment and look at the entire organization's benefits rather than a single cost number. That's something we did, and I'm really glad that we did. Best practices and IT strategy are shown on this last slide as a foundation. So let's take a look at some of these best practice benefits. Determining whether to outsource in itself is a strategic decision. It's not a tactical decision. the ITIL service management framework clearly indicates that having a single service desk is a best practice. That's pretty foundational. You may already have that in your organization, or you may be working toward that. But then consider that streamlined processes and efficiencies that a great vendor partner offers are part of your tool bag of best practices. The vendor partner will provide things like operational knowledge, training processes, infrastructure, scalability across human resources as well as infrastructure, and expertise in the support environment. The institutional partner must bring that part to the best practice equation, but then we have an important question we need to ask ourselves. What is our commitment? What is our skin in the game to make this work? And that's what we're going to focus the rest of our time together on. Our preparation for that question is an early indicator for how successful the partnership will be. We're going to take a deeper look as we move into considerations for outsourcing, but before we go there, I want to share a story, and we'll have a poll about some best practices. When we started with an outsourced partner, we had before we had an outsourced partner, we had a student-staffed Tier 1 service desk, and we had 86 Tier 2 and Tier 3 groups across central IT. And I know that some of you probably cringed at that, and some of you said, yeah, I get it. Most of those groups also had a Tier 1 customer ticket directly to Tier 3 highly paid staff path, where Tier 1 tickets were going straight to engineers. After we implemented an outsourced service desk partnership, we began actively pushing end users to the central service desk. We also eliminated over 40 of those Tier 2 and 3 queues through consolidation and process improvement. We put in a central Tier 2 queue or Tier 2 group using existing staff. We had one, but we really thought about what is the purpose of this group and how do we utilize it to be most efficient and effective. And we removed the direct to engineer path. We still have a long way to go years later, but through continual improvement, our goal is giving our users a better experience, better utilizing resources, and ultimately we're providing better value for our whole institution. An exceptional outsourced partner will work with you as you implement best practices within your organization and will help you deliver value to your organization. So let's jump to a quick poll here. I think we're going to spend about 40 seconds answering this question. How extensively has your institution implemented ITIL-based best practices for service management? We're just about halfway through. Go ahead and pick one and then vote. Okay.
Okay, it looks like we had pretty even response, about 40% that say they have a robust service management process, and another 40% we've started implementing services, and then 20% with what is idle.
So congrats on those of you who are already using ITIL-based service management. That's great. One of the foundations of ITIL is continual service improvement or continual process improvement. And certainly, if your answer was, what is ITIL? I would encourage you, you can reach out to me afterwards. ITIL is a wonderful service management framework, a set of best practices that's been around for some time for managing IT services. All right, let's go to considerations for outsourcing. I'd like to look at some often overlooked areas that really warrant consideration when you're considering outsourcing. That includes institutional culture, institutional impact, and resources needed. So let's look at institutional culture first. Culturally, you've got to know your institution. You've got to know your users and your customers and the difference between those three groups. You should ask a lot of questions about your culture, which will help with requirements definition and identification of risk and creating risk mitigation strategies. You should be asking questions like, are your customers change makers or are they change averse? Do they support progress for efficiency's sake and for global benefit, or are they resistant to most changes? Will they complain about talking to support off campus, or in some cases simply be unwilling to be helped? What about local or departmental or decentralized support? Do your customers and end users have local or departmental IT support, or is 100% of your IT support provided centrally? How will they respond to the statement, you need to contact the service desk to start receiving support? Cultural considerations are not just about end user culture. There's also financial culture of your institution. Is the IT service desk centrally funded and a common good service? Does it cover all departments? Is your institution siloed and each department provides support for their services individually, or do you have a mix? How about support governance and IT leadership cultures? Who is responsible for support at your institution? How do you define support? How do you define your services? How will an outsourced partner be managed and folded into your existing IT culture? How many tier 2 teams do you have? Is their response process consistent? Across those 86 tier 2 teams I mentioned, we had groups that would respond in 15 minutes, and we had groups that would respond in days or weeks. Establishing SLAs across your tier 2 groups and making things consistent goes a long way for providing a consistent response. That's with or without a outsourced vendor partner, but becomes increasingly important when your vendor partner is the face of support to your users. There's also IT project or technical culture. So assessing the culture of your technical projects is important. Do IT projects include the support role or the service desk function from the beginning of the project, or are service releases completed and then the service desk finds out there's a new service because a call came in? Certainly, are you a part of the service transition or the service release process? Thinking through these questions and documenting them in your project to outsource will significantly improve project outcomes. So let's go back to considerations for outsourcing and talk about impact to the institution. This is one that we weren't quite prepared for as well. Impact may or may not be felt as a significant shift, and it depends a lot on the answers to those questions about culture and your organization. For us, it took a couple of years before customers and end users and other support professionals around the university really started to see the benefits of outsourcing. Our first deployment was with another support partner, and at the time, it wasn't really well managed either by the vendor or by us, and our knowledge management processes were nearly non-existent. They were very immature at best. Today, we have a much more positive impact to our university by being able to provide a single location for customers and users to contact central IT for support. We'll dissect that a little bit, but let's talk about the resources needed as well while we're considering outsourcing. An outsourced partner relationship includes service management, knowledge management, and vendor management elements at a minimum. So how do we approach resources? That's a question that I get every time we're talking about outsourcing. We have one full-time operational and business relationship role. This person coordinates our day-to-day operations, does things like onboarding and offboarding of advisors in our systems. There's a quality review process they're responsible for, assists with knowledge review, does reporting, and internally is that go-to person for any issues relating to the tier 1 support relationship. We have one full-time knowledge coordinator who coordinates all support knowledge, both internal and with our vendor partner, and backs up that operational role. It's important to note that part of our story is we really took a hard look at knowledge, and we'll talk more about this in a few minutes, but our tier 2 staff have been repurposed to be liaisons with our project teams and our engineering teams, and they produce, as a result, the majority of the knowledge used by our Tier 1 advisors. The knowledge coordinator ensures that this knowledge that they produce is up to date. They identify gaps, they give direction to the Tier 2 authors regarding knowledge priorities. And we'll talk a lot more about knowledge in just a few minutes, because that's one of the key critical success factors for this relationship. And lastly, there's about 25% of one of my manager's positions that manages those staff and others to help manage the relationship. This person in our organization also has teams that deal with service request and fulfillment and other Tier 2 responsibilities. So they're split across a number of different teams. So using a model where responsibility for knowledge is defined and understood, as well as a quality assurance process, is an absolutely critical part of our relationship. We're going to talk about those individually as we get into what does it take to make a successful implementation, and then the ongoing management of your support partner. This list isn't perfect, but it could be defined for us as a continual goal. Having these items at least started will help you with a successful implementation. Well-defined scope is the first critical success factor. Know why you are outsourcing. That is important. For us, 24/7 support from a single consistent source was the key driver. Do you know what your services are? Do you have a service catalog? Is it up to date? These are questions that should sound very familiar. What is supported centrally? Because these tie right back to the culture for your organization. If you have segmented support or departmental support, which calls are routed to the service desk? Are there any issues that are not handled by your service desk? What happens when a call or a contact is out of scope? What's the process for handling those? Is it documented well? So what we've done is we've taken the culture and we're distilling it down into operational statements for success factors as you go to outsource your Tier 1 support. Good knowledge management is a major critical success factor. We really had a failure of knowledge management in our early days. I've already mentioned that. When we selected our first support partner, their agents or advisors were trying to write articles to fill in gaps when we first went live. And these were about services that they didn't know much about. Our Tier 3 engineers at the time were writing knowledge articles that were being used by frontline support advisors. And you can imagine that an engineer writing a knowledge article for frontline user-based support, they were pretty techy, and I'm just going to say they were really terrible. We were getting engineering answers to end user questions, and that doesn't work well. It was a mess, and we started, if I remember right, we had about 100 or so articles for well over 100 services. So very quickly, we had to transition the responsibility for knowledge authorship to the Tier 2 team. We brought in a written communication expert to provide training. We trained our Tier 2 staff on writing effective knowledge articles. The result today is that we have a much higher quality knowledge base, much higher readability for the advisors and end users, faster responses to problem areas, because the escalations from the Tier 1 service desk are coming into a Tier 2 group who can provide the knowledge quickly back to Tier 1. That's been a huge improvement in our processes. We formalized the process for culling out and at least annually reviewing the content in each article, something that is so difficult to do in practice, but we found the benefits make it absolutely worth the time to do. And ever improving. We're on the continual improvement path. Today, we've got over 2,000 knowledge articles, and we're working to add more and have things like meaningful ratings, and we do look at our access metrics to see how often they're accessed. So summarizing the importance of knowledge ownership and knowledge management, outsourcing is really different from calls that come into a central or an internal tier 1, tier 2 environment. You know, a lot of our institutions hire student workers to provide tier 1 support, and there's a lot of head knowledge among their peers and their coworkers, especially if you use a model where tier 2 sits beside tier 1 to help answer their questions. At a peak time for us, we could have anywhere from 60 to 80 people at Anthology working in some capacity on our account. And all those people need access to accurate knowledge to serve our customers, as well as the ability to provide us feedback on the quality or the accuracy of the article. So having a two-way communication path for knowledge in itself is absolutely critical. But generally speaking, the best practices around knowledge management apply here. Your written knowledge is the primary source for advisors or agents to answer your users' questions. So it has to be right. So let's ask this question, this poll question, and we won't take quite as much time on this one, but how much work would it take to provide a knowledge repository to a tier 1 support provider? Okay, go ahead and make your final selection and submit that if you would. Lisa, what do our results look like?
I love it. I was wondering if anybody was going to answer this. So we have 29% with a little, 14% with a moderate amount, 43 say a lot, and we do have 14% with a Herculean effort, which is my favorite.
I'm really glad for those of you who said a Herculean effort, because that's what it feels like. It really does. And it takes some time and it takes an intentional approach, but it doesn't happen in 30 days. For us, we spent a few years working through the process of cleaning up our knowledge. And I know that we would probably all agree that documentation is the most important thing to have, but the hardest thing to get done. Thank you for that. All right, so let's go back to things that make a successful implementation. And the next topic in that space is tools that are provided to your partner. So the question is, are tools available for your support partner to resolve the calls for you? Are processes in place to use those tools? Are the tools well documented? We really found a lot of cultural issues with the concept of giving a vendor access to the tools. There was an internal hesitancy to allow an outsourced partner to use them. There started to be this we-they thing. We weren't treating our vendor partner staff as employees of our own. Help desk tools were often omitted from services. There's a phrase that just makes my skin crawl from an engineering team, and that phrase is, well, it takes root to do that, and we're not giving them root access. And of course, that was nearly 15 years ago, but just that concept still gives me nightmares. Tools have to be a part of all projects involving IT services when you're rolling out a new service or updating an existing service. And it took us a lot of time to change our internal IT culture and build the level of trust to allow a vendor partner to truly be a partner and to provide them tools that they need to answer and resolve our users' questions. So today, we always include the support role at the beginning of each project, and the project management teams know that we will be having a conversation about what tools do we need to provide in order to support our end users. We've come a long way in that space. Available support tools will drive first call resolution, and first call resolution directly impacts customer satisfaction as well as efficiency. And again, we're back at the whole value proposition. And that's regardless of who is providing your frontline support, but it's increasingly important when you have an outsourced support partner. So some considerations for ongoing partnership management. The first concept here is probably the most important one. You need to plan on managing your vendor partner. That is our ongoing #1 critical success factor. It's been tied to the partner vendor management space. I'm going to touch on a few topics here, and then the next slide, we're going to take a deeper dive into quality assurance and what that process looks like. So daily operations. Let's start with that. Continually leveraging best practices in your organization and also your partner's organization is an ongoing activity. The main point here is to ensure that you have a regular rhythm of reviewing and updating your own organizational processes to include your support partner as a key stakeholder. Think about what reporting you're going to need from your vendor partner. How will you build or receive the data that you need for your own metrics that are important to your institution? Also consider how your vendor partner will fit into your major incident management process. There's also the process for new service rollouts. Organizationally, you will need to ensure that your external support partner is inserted as a stakeholder into project management processes and early. Ask questions of your potential partner about how they manage new service rollouts from their perspective within their clients. Do they assign an account manager? Do they have a separate assigned project team? How do they train their advisors? Who provides the training material? Do they even have a process for new services? Then there's the daily communication and ongoing feedback. How will you communicate with your vendor partner? The obvious is, we have email and chat, and you might even still have a phone on your desk to pick up. But what about more recent technologies like Teams or work groups? How will you make sure that you're communicating regularly? We implemented a Teams channel with all the advisors and supervisors at our Tier 1 vendor partners staff so that those individuals could reach out directly to our Tier 2 staff via Teams. At first, I was a little skeptical about it. At first, I was a lot skeptical about it. I thought that maybe that would be a big crutch that the advisors would use to avoid looking up knowledge. But what we've learned is it has worked really well in filling some of our knowledge gaps and exposing them first, but also allowing them to serve our users faster. We've gotten efficiencies out of that. We can also see Tier 1 advisors chatting amongst each other. We get an early indicator of issues when there's a significant problem or maybe an incident is brewing, but we're not 100% sure. So we've actually received some benefit from that after implementing and then measuring against it. Operational conference calls. Think about the frequency and attendance. Weekly we have those 2.5 FTEs or 2.25 FTEs that I mentioned earlier, as well as some key contacts from our vendor partner get together on an operations call to discuss issues from the previous week, any trends that there might be brewing, as well as that's an opportunity we use to announce upcoming projects and discuss through things in terms of rolling out new services or improvements and getting that on their radar. We also have an executive level call, which is more strategic in nature, which typically is on a monthly, sometimes quarterly basis. And we bring our help services manager, a director of service support, and our account manager at Anthology to that smaller meeting to stay in touch. But probably the most important part of ongoing management is the quality assurance process. The quality assurance or quality review process is an area for us that is make or break in our relationship. When we initially outsourced, our vendor was small. They had processes, but they had an immature quality assurance process, and we needed immediate improvement from them, so we created a process. We stood up a very simple shareable tracking list. Yes, I can't remember exactly. It was in SharePoint or Excel. We listed our complaints and we listed low customer satisfaction ratings, and then we simply documented the response, whether it was us improving knowledge or the vendor providing some additional training to each complaint. And that simple process has grown, and we've automated a large part of it, but now, because we started that small that many years ago, as we have moved to a vendor that has robust quality assurance processes, we learned that they aligned perfectly with the simple one we had set up. It was just more well-oiled and more automated. The key here is that quality assurance cycle, the fact that we document a complaint or document an issue and we don't close that record until it has been resolved or responded to, is really key for us. So in this space, these are questions that you can and should be asking. What does your quality assurance process look like? Your institution's process, is there one? What does your vendor's process look like when things don't go the way they should? So for us, we review feedback from a number of different sources, including contact forms on our website, after call surveys, and after ticket closure surveys. We have a pretty high bar. On a 5-point scale, if someone rates 3.5 or lower, we follow up and find out what happened. Internally, we build out an executive level chronology. We literally have that operational role, open up the case, look at the details, listen to the call recordings, read the chat interaction, and also open the knowledge that we have and recreate the steps in a bullet point form to assess where things went wrong. Where did it break? And what we've learned over the years is that the problem or the issue typically falls into one of 3 areas. Either additional knowledge is needed from us, or advisor correction is needed from our partner, or advisor training is needed. And you could call those the same thing, but there is a slight difference. After we identify which area it is and assign it to the right party to follow through on, we correct the issue. So if it's knowledge, we write a new article or we correct incorrect information in an existing article. If it is advisor related, it's your partner's internal coaching and feedback process that is so very important. And because it's documented, it allows you and your partner to monitor for trends. And that's in their employee performance, or it could be trends, problems with our IT services. We get a benefit out of it both ways. So questions for your partner. Does your partner address quality issues within the same shift, or within 24 hours, or within a week? We found that the faster that micro training or coaching correction is provided, the better. Just-in-time training really can't be a week or 2 later. Does your partner use a system to report back to you the results of those coaching sessions? That's important for us. How do we get the assurance that those just-in-time or micro training sessions have occurred and that they don't have follow-up questions or additional information that would change what we heard on that executive report out? The real bottom line here is that having a quality assurance process that you and your vendor partner can easily use contributes to the success of the ongoing relationship. So let's ask a question about that. Which metrics do you have in place to monitor quality today and to provide correction or updates as needed? And you can select any there that you have in place. We'll go ahead and give about 15 more seconds on this. Check any of those that you have in place today. I think we have just a couple of seconds left here. Okay, Lisa, what did we say?
Yeah. So we have 80% say they have surveys that they do, 40% with call recordings, 80% again for trainings and coaching, and 60% for other.
That's great. We will try to get through a couple of more points, and I would love to hear what else you're using. All right. So one of the things that I'm often asked about before we wrap things up is, how our vendor partner handles the beginning of semester support. And this is something, I have to admit, this is a part that I don't miss anymore. First, our vendor partner staffs up and provides onboarding and training in the weeks and months ahead of our semester start or our move-in week. And then throughout the semester, they work hard to keep the best of the best advisors and to make them permanent employees. And of course, at Tier 1 support, we all know that there's a amount of turnover, and it's typically an industry with high turnover. So natural attrition occurs, and it leads them to staff up prior to each semester based on forecasts that they carefully review from their history with us, as well as our input. We spend a considerable amount of time talking about our projects and what we believe the support impact will be in the coming 6, 12, and 18 months. So we have a cycle where we're doing metrics and we're forecasting, they staff up, and they try to keep the best of the best. I think it's important to note that this semester that we're coming up on is the very first semester that I can remember that our vendor has been able to staff and retain highly talented frontline support advisors, and they are not needing to hire anybody for our relationship. I'm really excited about that the processes that they have in place are working. Another benefit that we've experienced is geographic distribution or diversity, specifically thinking about natural disaster issues, thinking about flooding. We had a derecho a number of years ago that brought some mini tornadoes. Some of us are in hurricane zones. Some of us deal more with snow. None of these issues were issues for our vendor partner, where we might have been unable to get to our campus or our grounds, but with multiple call centers and many remote workers, that's not an issue. They know how to shift resources and continue to cover our account in any of those situations. And even earlier this week, when we had a large part of our campus completely closed for over 12 hours, nobody in, nobody out, not an issue for us. Also, for major incidents, before we outsourced, and this will date the age of this comment, we had 24/7 mainframe operators. We're the only 24/7 staff in our organization, and they were monitoring probably analog phones at the time for user-reported outages. But now we have a vendor-supported IT service desk that's 24/7. The advisors themselves receive the calls. That's part of what they're there for. And we spend a considerable investment training them to identify, prioritize, and then kick off that major incident management process if we don't detect that with monitoring on the back end. So in summary, I hope that thinking through some of what we've talked about today has been helpful to you. Before the relationship, working on knowledge, thinking about your culture, working on things like scope, including a vendor partner in your IT service lifecycle and all of your processes is so very important. During an implementation, putting into action your communication plan and setting expectations for all of those cultural considerations that you thought about is very important. And then post-implementation, thinking about how you will manage your vendor. Not very different than managing a local team, except the HR part of that management is taken care of for you, and that's a big plus in my book. But you get to, and you should be thinking about managing areas with more strategic and long-term value for your institution. Just last week on EDUCAUSE's ITSM discussion board, I made a comment that included these words: I cannot imagine moving back to a locally staffed service desk after discovering the value in the outsourced partnership. We've worked really hard to treat this strategic vendor as a partner where we both bring responsibilities to the table and we both take them seriously. And that's our number one critical success factor. Then the rest just falls into place. So with that comment, I thank you for attending, and I really hope that you've received some value for your time. I think we have a few minutes that we can take questions if you have any. Feel free to put them in the chat.
Yes, please. We do have, I don't have any questions in there just yet, but please, if any of you have questions, I thank Tracy so much I can't even share with you all. You've now heard it, but Tracy provides so much insight and truly has been an incredible partner for us. Just can't even say it enough. But please, if you have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat now. We did have a request, Tracy, for you to share your contact information, if that's okay.
Oh yeah,
in,
absolutely.
in the chat. We do have a comment, not necessarily a question, but it just says, great session. Thank you for the info. So we appreciate it very much. And yeah, it's just been wonderful. So any other questions, please don't hesitate to put them in there. You can give it another that Tracy did put his
Actually, I need to send that to everybody. Just one moment.
Yeah, we'll get Tracy to put his email in there so you can reach out. Again, another comment in here to say thanks again. It was great. Again, thank you for your attendance today.
So it looks like I can't send to attendees, but I'll spell it out. The email
Oh,
is tracy@virginia.edu, tracy@virginia.edu. You can feel free to, yeah, there you go. Thanks,
there
Lisa.
you go.
Yep, there you go. Thank you.
Love it. We just roll with it.
Yeah.
Well, if we do not have any more questions, we'll go ahead and wrap us up for today. Again, Tracy, thank you so much for joining us. Definitely appreciate it. And thank you all for attending today, spending possibly your lunch hour with us. And again, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to myself or to Tracy for anything along the way. But thank you all so much for attending. Have a wonderful day.